Here we go. Bloody Mary. Bloody Mary. Bloody Mary is possibly one of the better known urban legends out there, but if you're not familiar with the spooky game, let me give you a bit of insight. It's a game that, if played correctly, can summon the evil, terrifying ghost of a woman who will haunt your dreams forever or worse. To play the creepy game, you're required to stand in a dark room, your only source of light coming from a single lit candle, and then you gaze into a mirror and begin to say aloud her name 3 times. Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. Then, as you peer into the mirror, the ghost of Mary is supposed to appear behind you, sometimes appearing as a corpse, sometimes a witch, and sometimes completely covered in blood. And she has also been known to appear holding a dead baby. What happens next differs from story to story. She will either strike you down dead, or let out a soul-chilling scream from the other side of the mirror, curse at you, or even lunge out of the mirror to claw away at your eyes, strangle you and drink all of your blood, or she will simply drag you into the mirror, where you will spend the rest of your days living on the other side of the glass. The game is pretty much universal, but there are some differences from different regions. For example, in some regions it is said that Mary's name has to be spoken not 3 times but 13. Also, the chant is said to have different versions such as I believe in Mary Worth, Kathy come out, Bloody Mary I stole your baby, or Bloody Mary I killed your baby. Mary has also been known to have many different names. According to Snopes.com, here are a few. Bloody Bones, Mary Worthington, Mary Wales, Mary Johnson, Mary Lee, Mary Jane, Sally, Kathy, Agnes, Black Agnes, Aggie, and Savart Madame. Now, where I grew up in the UK when I was a child, we had a version of Bloody Mary, but we didn't call her Bloody Mary where I was from, we called her the Grey Lady. And it was the same premise, you stared into a mirror, but instead of saying Bloody Mary 3 times, we would say Grey Lady, Grey Lady, Grey Lady. In early versions of the game, the whole reason behind playing was for young girls to get a peek into their future and be given a glimpse of their future husband. In this version of the game, you were supposed to play in a dark house. Like the modern version, you would light a candle and peer into a mirror, but this time it would have to be a hand mirror, because this version required you to be looking into the mirror whilst walking up the stairs backwards. If all went well, the player would see the face of their future husband in the glass. But there was also a chance of seeing a screaming skull or the Grim Reaper, which indicated death before they had a chance to meet their husband-to-be. So where does the Bloody Mary legend come from? Is it based on one particular person? Well, actually there are a few possibilities, starting with a woman who was believed to be a witch called Mary Worth. Now, do you remember one of those different chants that I mentioned earlier? The one where you say, I believe in Mary Worth 3 times rather than Bloody Mary 3 times. Well, it would seem that a Mary Worth was the name of a witch who lived on the Old Wagon Road in Chicago, Illinois during the Civil War. The story goes that Mary would kidnap runaway slaves and keep them in her barn and practice her satanic rituals on them, which always ended in death. When the locals eventually learned what Mary was doing, they took the law into their own hands, which resulting in the witch being dragged from her farmhouse and burned at the stake on her own property, and the corpse was left there for the birds to pick away at whatever was left. Now, sometime later, the witch's farm land was purchased by a farmer and his wife. It is said that the couple built their new home where the witch's barn used to be. One day, the farmer came across a stone when digging out a field. He thought the stone would make a great stepping stone and relocated it elsewhere on his property, which seemed to cause absolute mayhem. They started to experience strange happenings such as getting locked in the house or barn and items being thrown around their home. Realising that they had probably removed a gravestone which marked the burial place of the witch, the farmer decided to replace the stone. The only problem was, he couldn't remember where he had gotten it from in the first place, and so it was said the paranormal activity continued throughout the years until the house was burned down in 1986 due to arson. Many believe that Mary Worth is the origin of Bloody Mary, but there are a few other theories. Another woman believed to be Mary is Queen Mary I, who reigned over England in 1553 until her death in 1558. It was in this time that Murray ruthlessly had several hundred Protestants murdered in an attempt to restore Christianity in England. It was because of this that she was given the name Bloody Mary by the public, especially the Protestants. Also, it's worth mentioning that Queen Mary never had children and suffered many false pregnancies up until the day she died. Maybe this is the reason some use the chant, "Mary, I have your baby," or "Mary, I killed your baby," while staring into the mirror. And because of her ruthless ways and cruel intent, Queen Mary is often believed to be the original origin story of the urban legend. Another theory is that the Hungarian Countess Elizabeth Bathory, who was born in 1560 and murdered at least 650 young women between 1585 and 1609, may also be the origin story of the Bloody Mary legend. Now, the Guinness World Records actually says that she is the most prolific female murderer ever. Many of her victims were young servant girls and peasant girls who were lured to their doom with a promise of payment, or just simply abducted. The girls were mainly 10 to 14 years old. When the Countess was eventually brought to court for her crimes, grim details emerged as to what happened to the hundreds of young girls who were brutally slaughtered. An incredible 300 witnesses came forward and gave some shocking details. Bathory was said to have carried out the following cruelties on the young girls: beatings, burning of the flesh, mutilation of the hands. She liked to bite chunks of flesh from their face, arms and legs and other places. She liked to submerge them in freezing cold water, or pour honey all over them, followed by biting ants. It was also said that the Countess was known to bathe in the blood of the virgins in an attempt to keep her youth, although the tales of bathing in blood came long after the trial, and there is no evidence of this in the actual court files. However, the bathing in blood might explain the link with the Bloody Mary legend, and the spirit appearing covered head to toe in blood. Bathory was placed in solitary confinement and kept in a set of rooms which were bricked up inside of a castle, with only small slits for ventilation and food. 4 years later, she died in the bricked up room. Another theory is that the origin of the Bloody Mary game may have not started centuries ago, but in more modern times, but this is more of an urban legend in itself. The tale begins with a young woman named Mary Worth, like the witch, but not this time, was involved in an awful car crash, leaving her face horribly mutilated. Before the crash, it is said that the young woman was very beautiful and would stare into her reflection every day. But after the crash, looking in the mirror became a painful experience for Mary, and she eventually started to lose her mind, and one day decided to walk into the mirror and terrorise her victims from the other side. Now, that's the main suspects for the origin of Bloody Mary, but I thought we'd have a look at some of the superstitions that surround the mirror itself. Mirrors have been connected with superstition now for centuries, and here are just a few of the more popular superstitions that are going around, or have been at some time. I'm sure you heard that breaking a mirror can give you 7 years bad luck, but did you know some of the following? If a mirror breaks of its own will, this means you will lose your best friend. If a mirror falls from a wall and breaks, this means that someone from the household will die soon. If a mirror falls from the wall and does not break, then this is considered good luck. It is said that if newlyweds stand in front of a mirror after their wedding day, this ensures that their souls will be united in the afterlife. Mirrors must be covered in homes of a recently deceased person to ensure that the spirit will not become trapped inside the mirror and haunt the family. Also, family members must not look into the mirror until the dead family members are laid to rest. It's considered bad luck to fall asleep in front of a mirror, in case evil spirits decide to steal your soul as you sleep. If your reflection ever gives you a scare, this is said to be good luck. And it would seem that old superstition of seeing a future vision of your husband in the mirror may have had a few different versions. This one involves staring into a mirror with a candle, then slice an apple into 9 pieces, eat 8 of them, and throw the 9th piece into the mirror, and your future husband will appear and catch the apple. Staring into a mirror in a dimly lit room can actually cause you to hallucinate. Staring for a long period of time in your own reflection can trick your eyes into thinking that your own face is actually changing. Now, consider me your guinea pig, because this has actually happened to me a few years ago. I wasn't playing Bloody Mary. I was more interested in just doing a hallucination experiment. And this is what I did. I lit a candle in the bathroom and stared at my own reflection for a long period of time, always keeping my eyes fixed at the same spot. At first nothing strange happened. Then I started to notice that the room began to blur and fade, but I was determined to hold my gaze and proceed to stare into my own eyes. And then it happened, my face changed. The face I was looking at, it no longer looked like mine. I was now looking at the face of my dad. It shocked me and broke my concentration, and all at once my face returned to normal. And it was only when I was researching this subject that I found out that seeing the face of your parents is actually a vision that many experience, as well as witnessing their face melting, disappearing, turning into an animal, or simply becoming distorted and unrecognisable. And this may explain why people report seeing dead relatives or spirits, or even, dare I say, Bloody Mary when they peer into a mirror for a long period of time. However, this is not considered supernatural. It is believed that this can be put down to the brain misfiring and causing these illusions, like a kind of self-hypnosis. And believe it or not, there's actually a term for this optical illusion, and it's called Troxlers Fading. Troxlers Fading is a term given to the brain experiencing an optical illusion affecting visual perception. This happens when you focus your eyes on one spot for a long period of time, eventually causing your brain to kind of malfunction. And this causes anything on the outside of your vision to disappear or distort. And if you want to experience this optical illusion without actually attempting to summon a mirror demon, you can search on the internet for the lilac chaser illusion. This is a clever optical illusion, and here's how it works. You stare at 12 lilac dots that are all placed around in a circle. One of the dots seems to be moving around the circle, and in the centre there is a black cross. The idea is to focus your eyes on the black cross. Eventually, the lilac dots should disappear before your eyes, and the illusion takes hold. Anyway, so it looks like to me that the legend of Bloody Mary is probably nothing more than an optical illusion, simply caused by the lack of light and self-hypnosis.
Here we go. Bloody Mary. Bloody Mary. Bloody Mary.
Let me take you back in time. The place, London, England. The year, 1837. The very same year that Queen Victoria became the Queen of England. At this time, London was going through a population growth due to the Industrial Revolution, which brought people of all different cultures to start a life in the city. The rich lived a privileged life in luxurious homes, whilst the poor lived in filth-ridden slums, where crime was rife among the poorly lit streets. It would be 51 years before murders committed by the famous Jack the Ripper took place in Whitechapel. But long before Jack the Ripper, the streets of London would be plagued by another entity, who also was named Jack. Spring-heeled Jack. Unlike Jack the Ripper, Spring-heeled Jack did not actually murder anyone. His intent seemed to mainly want to harass or harm his victims. He has been described as many things, including a tall white bull, a ghost, or a fire-breathing demon. Or the more likely explanation, that Jack was indeed a person dressed in oilskin garments, wearing a mask under a hooded face, with eyes that burned red, and sharp steel claws on his fingers that would tear at your skin as he vomited blue flame into your face. The first confirmed sightings of Spring-heeled Jack were in London of 1837, but there were a few other reports beforehand that fit Jack's profile. The first story tells of a gentleman walking home late one night. The man was walking past a cemetery when all of a sudden an horrific figure jumped over the cemetery railings that were considerably high and landed right in front of the startled man, who described the figure as a muscular male with devilish features. He had a large nose, pointed ears, and eyes that burn like fire. He then fled the scene, leaving the man unharmed. Shortly later, a barmaid named Polly Adams was found laying unconscious in the street, her clothing half ripped from her body, with gashes to her belly area. When Polly regained consciousness, she described her attacker as a devilish man with large ears and nose, and eyes that burn red. She also commented on claws that ripped the blouse straight off of her body as he fondled her breast with his other hand, whilst tearing at her skin. Another of Spring-Heeled Jack's victims was a Mary Stevens. Mary was making her way through Clapham Common on her way to work, when suddenly a demonic-looking figure sprang from a dark alleyway. He grabbed Mary whilst trying to kiss her face as he tore at her clothing with his metal claws. Mary managed to let out a loud scream, which caught the attention of people close by, but before help came, the attacker fled the scene. Murray later stated that the attacker's touch was cold and clammy, like that of a corpse. The very next night, not far from where the attack took place on Murray Stevens, Jack sprang in front of a passing horse and carriage, causing the coachman to lose control and crash the carriage, severely injuring himself. Witnesses later reported the demonic figure escaping by springing 9 foot up into the air, right over a high wall, whilst letting out an evil screeching laugh. News of the strange figure soon spread and reached the newspapers, who gave him the name Spring-Heeled Jack, and the rest is history. Not long after the newspaper reports, the Lord Mayor of London was forced to publicly acknowledge the possible existence of the elusive Spring-Heeled Jack, although he still remained sceptical. A lot of people believed the tales to be nothing more than a new ghost story that were a dime a dozen in London at the time. But the stories continued, and the next is probably one of the most popular reports of Spring-Heeled Jack. On this occasion, a dark-hooded figure caught the attention of a young lady named Jane Alsop as he violently rang the doorbell of her home. Jane answered the door to be greeted by a hooded man shrouded in darkness with the help of his cape. He claimed he was a policeman. He spoke clear English and asked Jane to quickly bring him a candle, for he had captured Spring-Heeled Jack. Jane quickly went inside and grabbed a lit candle and returned to the door. The figure grabbed the candle and seemed to somehow attach it to his chest, illuminating his face, revealing hideous features. He wore a helmet on his head, which sat above fiery red eyes that burned into his sockets. Jane also reported that he was wearing an oil-skinned garment that was tight-fitting, and as he snarled at her, blue flame shot from his mouth. Jane turned to run inside, but the devilish figure grabbed her and placed her into a headlock and started to rip at her clothing with his metallic claws, as well as tearing clumps of hair from her head, whilst slashing at her arms. Luckily, Jane's sister heard all the commotion and came to Jane's rescue, pulling her back into the house. The cloaked figure continued to ring the bell violently until Jane's father shouted for the police from the window, and the assailant ran away into the night. Just days later, another attack happened in a different part of London, not as widely reported as Jane's encounter, but just as frightening. Lucy Scales and her sister were walking home from their brother's house around 8:30 p.m. As they walked along Green Dragon Alley, they noticed a dark figure appear in front of them. Lucy was walking ahead of her sister as she approached the figure, and noticed he was completely covered by a large dark cape. Without warning, it then spurted blue flame into her face, blinding her and sending her collapsing to the ground, and was overcome with violent fits which continued for several hours. Lucy's brother heard the screams from his home and came running to the scene of the attack to find Lucy's sister holding her in her arms. Spring-Heeled Jack was nowhere to be seen. The sister later described the attacker to be tall and thin, dressed like a gentleman, enveloped in a long cape, and carried in front of himself a lamp similar to those carried by the police. After he blew the flame in Lucy's face, he made no attempt to harm either of the sisters, nor did he speak. He just simply turned and walked away. The paper covered these stories and more, as possible copycats started to emerge from the shadows. Spring-Heeled Jack quickly became a recurring character in the Penny Dreadful books, where Jack was portrayed as a supernatural figure, or a mysterious criminal, and even a steampunk superhero. Reports of Jack continued to emerge now and again, but gradually started to calm down. The next sighting came about 40 years later, in 1877, at the Aldershot military base. It was late one night, as a sentry on nighttime duty noticed a strange figure advancing towards him from the darkness. The soldier ordered the unknown person to halt, but his orders were ignored. The figure ran up to the soldier and proceeded to slap him around the face. The guard then drew his weapon and shot at the figure with no visible effect, as he sprang high off the ground and bounded into the darkness, leaving the soldier totally bewildered and confused. And finally, the last known appearance was reported in Liverpool in the northwest of England, where Stingy Jack was seen bounding from rooftop to rooftop of an old church. Jack's true identity was never discovered. There have been many theories that maybe he was not one man but many, with a sick sense of humour, or as many believed in 1837, that Jack was indeed the devil himself. Whatever your view of the character is, there is no denying that Stingy Jack caused quite a stir in his day, as mentioned before, appearing in the many penny dreadful books, and more cruelly, being the subject of many a child's bedtime story to convince them not to misbehave. These stories and more have become responsible for fueling the urban legend that still lives on today.
Welcome to Bizarre Tales, the Halloween special. When I think of Halloween, there are a few things that instantly come to mind, such as dressing up as ghosts, vampires, witches, and other gruesome characters, trick or treat, and eating an insane amount of candy, and of course, the jack-o'-lantern, which is most commonly carved out of pumpkins. Every year we love to carve out the most horrific face we can imagine out of these stringy, pulp-filled, overgrown fruits. But why? Why do we enjoy ripping out the guts of these pumpkins, cutting out a scary face, and then placing a candle inside? Well, to find out the answer, I'm going to have to take you back in time to Ireland, sometime between the 18th and 19th century. It was a time when superstition festered inside people's minds, and it was also the time that a mythical character was born into existence. A character who tricked the devil not once, but twice, and his name was Stingy Jack. Jack was said to be a miserable old drunken blacksmith, a tight fist, with not a shred of kindness in his black heart, and on top of this, he was very cunning and cruel, a trickster and a manipulator. So much so he had built up quite a reputation of being just an awful human being with not a shred of decency about him. He was a very selfish soul. He quickly gained the appropriate nickname of Stingy Jack. Jack's unfriendly ways caught the attention of the devil himself, and it is said that the devil both admired Jack and despised him for being almost as evil as he was. The devil decided that Jack must die. He craved Jack's despicable soul and decided that it must be carved out of him. And with the devil being the devil, he knew exactly where to find Jack at the precise time. And so the devil lay down in the middle of a footpath on a cold, lonely, windy night when the moon was full in the sky. It wasn't long before Jack came stumbling along that very same footpath, as drunk as a skunk, and he instantly noticed this strange figure laying on the floor in front of him. As Jack approached the body on the floor, the devil whipped his head around, and the light of the moon illuminated his horrific features. Jack, startled, jumped back as the devil rose to his feet. Jack gave a shudder as the devil grew in size right in front of him, engulfing him in his dark shadow. The devil outstretched his bony finger and pointed between Jack's eyes. And then, the devil spoke.
"I have come for your soul."
Jack gave a long, hard, dry gulp. It had been only 10 minutes since his last shot of whiskey, and he would have given anything for one more shot right now to calm his nerves, although he wasn't sure that it would help. Jack plucked up the courage, and then he spoke.
May I have one request before you take my soul?
Said Jack. The devil was a little shocked by this man's nerve, or maybe stupidity, to even be thinking of speaking to him. But he was now curious and a little bit amused, and he nodded to Jack.
Name it, Jack.
Jack paused for a moment, licked his dry, cracked lips, and spoke.
A pint of ale is what I request. One last pint.
The devil was somewhat amused, and saw no reason not to grant Jack's last request.
Very well, Jack. One drink, and one drink only, and when you are done, your soul is mine.
And so Jack and the devil went to the nearest inn, and ordered his beverage. Jack and the devil, who seemed to be invisible to all but Jack himself, sat at the bar and ordered his last drink. And a mug of golden brown ale was placed in front of Jack. Jack looked up at the devil's terrifying face, and the devil seemed to be getting impatient, and he gestured for Jack to get a move on and drink. Jack lifted the mug and tipped the ale down his throat until it was empty. He slammed the mug down on the bar and stared up nervously at the devil, who now had a, pardon the pun, a devilish smile upon his face.
Your soul is mine now, Jack.
Wait,
Said Jack.
We haven't paid the bartender for the drink.
The devil looked bemused as Jack went on.
I would pay the bartender myself, but I am short of money,
Said Jack. Now what we must remember is that Jack was a trickster. He had a silver tongue and a way with words, and somehow he persuaded the devil to turn into a single golden coin to pay for the drink. In an instant, the devil transformed into the coin, and without hesitation, Jack grabbed the coin and stuffed it deep inside his dirty trouser pocket, the very same pocket where he just so happened to keep his crucifix. And with that, the devil was unable to transform back into his true form. He was trapped inside Jack's pocket. Jack got up from his stool at the bar and walked out of the inn into the moonlight, and then started to speak to his trouser pocket.
Okay, Mr. Devil, sir.
Jack said.
I want to make a deal with you. I will release you on one condition, and that is that you let me go free for a whole 10 years.
As Jack finished speaking, the coin in his pocket seemed to get hotter, and anger radiated from it as it let out a high-pitched, horrific scream. Jack simply said,
Okay, stay in there.
and with that, the coin calmed down and all was silent. And then the devil spoke.
Fine, Jack. You have a deal.
And with that, Jack released the devil. Jack took the coin out of his pocket and tossed it down onto the floor. And in an instant, the devil stood over Jack and said,
From this day on, your days are numbered. I will return.
and with that, the devil disappeared. For 10 years, Jack continued with his wicked, cruel, manipulative ways. He didn't worry much about the devil's return. After all, he tricked him once, and he was confident he could do it again. 10 years later, to the exact second, the devil returned, appearing in front of Jack, once again on a dirt path surrounded by trees, one of which was an apple tree.
Well, Jack, your 10 years are up. Your soul is now mine.
The devil moved forward to claim what was his, when Jack spoke.
Wait. I have a request before you take my soul.
The devil stopped in his tracks.
What?
My stomach is empty, and I don't want to die on an empty stomach. Before you take my soul, may I have one of those apples from that tree?
The devil looked up to see the hanging fruit. The devil saw no reason not to get Jack an apple and climbed the tree. And once again, without hesitation, Jack pulled out a blade and carved a cross into the tree, which prevented the devil from descending, trapping him once again. The devil let out an almighty roar. He had now been fooled not once but twice by Jack. Jack waited till the devil was quiet and spoke.
I'll make a deal with you,
He said.
No deal. Your soul belongs to me.
Fine, said Jack. Stay up there. Jack began to walk away.
Very well, Jack.
Jack turned and smiled.
Here's the deal.
Said Jack.
Leave me and my soul alone, and I'll release you.
What?
Leave me and my soul alone, and I'll release you.
The devil, knowing he was trapped and had no choice, let out another almighty roar that seemed to shake the ground that Jack stood upon.
Very well, Jack, but mark my words and you mark them well, we shall meet again.
And with that, the devil vanished. And Jack was left in peace for the rest of his miserable, manipulative days until the drink finally killed him. On the day of Jack's death, his soul rose up into heaven and Jack stood before God, who refused him entrance due to his sinful, wicked ways. And Jack fell back down to earth and found himself at the gates of hell. The fiery gates opened, but the entrance was blocked by Satan himself.
Hello, Jack. I said we would meet again. How can I help you?
Jack paused and said,
May I enter?
The devil smiled.
Sorry, Jack, I made you a deal, and a deal is a deal.
Jack fell down on his knees and begged the devil to take his soul.
Sorry, Jack, like I said, a deal is a deal, and now you face a much heavier fate.
The devil thrust a single hollowed out turnip into Jack's hands, and then he turned and reached down into the fires of hell and produced a single glowing hot ember that he threw into the hollowed out turnip, and banished Jack to walk the earth for an eternity, never resting, trapped in a dark void between heaven and hell, with only his lantern to light the way. Now, the story of Stingy Jack became a very popular tale to tell in Ireland at the time, and it is said that the good people of Ireland, filled with fear and superstition in these dark days in history, would hollow out turnips and place a candle inside, and then place the turnip facing outwards on the windowsill or door frame to keep away Stingy Jack and other evil spirits that roamed the night on All Hallows Eve. And as time went by and the story of Stingy Jack was passed down to generation, the story did differ slightly and Jack became known under different names. He was known as Jack the Smith, Drunk Jack, Flaky Jack, and Jack of the Lantern, and eventually the more familiar Jack-o'-lantern. But wait, that doesn't explain why he carried a turnip and not a pumpkin. Well, in Ireland in those days, pumpkins simply didn't exist. They weren't natively grown in Ireland. You see, in those days in Ireland, they simply used different kinds of root vegetables to make the lanterns and scare off the evil spirits with. However, once the story of Stingy Jack crossed the ocean to America, it became a lot more popular and it became a tradition. And in America, turnips were hard to come by. But pumpkins were very easy to come by. And ever since, on Halloween, there's nothing we like to do more than carve out a spooky face into the overgrown winter squash and place it on our doorstep to greet trick-or-treaters, or maybe, just maybe, ward off evil spirits, including Stingy Jack, the jack-o'-lantern. So until we all meet again, I hope you all have a very creepy, spooky, scary Halloween. I'll see you next time, boys and ghouls. Bye bye.